So Elvis, do you know any books that Steve Donahue may not have read? Do you think he read this one? What do you think? Maybe? Yes? No? Probably no, but we don't know, do we? So let's ask him. Let's see how many of these books Steve Donahue has read or not. Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Book Time with Elvis, with me, Mark, and of course Elvis that you just saw at the beginning. And we're going to do a kind of tag, I think. It's a tag, isn't it? We're going to do the Has Steve Read It Season 2 tag. This tag was originally started back in Season 1 by Matthew at Maybury Book Club, and it's been revived apparently by Daniel over at Guilty Feet. And the object is to find 8 books that you think Steve Donahue hasn't read. There are some caveats, so they can be foreign books, but they must have been translated into English, and obviously something that isn't too obscure to make it ridiculous. No kind of bizarre instruction manuals and things like that. Well, Elvis and I have been racking our brains because we obviously think that Steve has read a lot of books, and I think we've come up with a few. I don't expect to get them all right. But I would hope to get at least 3, maybe, because it's very difficult. I mean, I could easily have come up with some very obscure books because I do have a lot of Central European authors, Eastern European authors that I bought in those countries in translation, and I don't think they're necessarily that easy to get hold of abroad. So I didn't go for any of those. I do have 3 works that are in translation, but I think they are by authors well enough known outside of their native countries that they could possibly have been read by Steve, but they may not have been. So yes, I struggled because a lot of the things I came up with as well were history or travel, and I think it would be much easier to find more obscure history books that Steve very likely wouldn't have read, because it's such a vast topic. I think non-fiction. I believe that Steve would have probably read a lot of novels. I know he likes non-fiction, of course, but I think when I look at the books in the bookcase behind him, usually I'm seeing a lot of novels, so I think that's the more dangerous end. But I've kind of divided it up. Sorry, I'm rambling again. I've divided it up, so I've got the 8 books. Unfortunately, I've only got 6 with me, and the other 2 are from my Kindle. But I'll pop probably the pictures up when I come to them. So actually, I'll start with them first, get them out of the way, and then I can go through the rest of the books I've got. I've mentioned it before, and actually I recommended, the first one to Steve when he was talking about the David Wishart series, the Marcus Corvinus Roman Mystery Series. And the first book is the Pericles Commission by Gary Corby, and it's mystery novels. Well, it's the first in a series of mystery novels set in ancient Greece, which I've talked about before on my channel, so I won't say too much about it. But the Pericles Commission by Gary Corby. You'll probably see it right here. Okay, and the second book that I haven't got with me, which I'm speaking slowly because I've actually just forgotten what it is, so hopefully it will come back to me. We'll have to see. Oh yes, I cheated there. I paused it. I remember, and how silly of me, because it's like one of my favourites. The second book it's like a collection of short stories that kind of run together, but it's Portuguese Irregular Verbs by Alexander McCall Smith. Steve may have read it, but I don't think he has. He's probably delved into the Number 1 Ladies Detective Agency, perhaps, or maybe some of his others. But I think Portuguese Irregular Verbs, there's a good chance, I think Steve hasn't read it. It's just a kind of parody on German academia. For example, how Germans like to add their academic titles to their name. So, they could be Dr. von Eaglefeld, for example, but he'll have maybe 3 doctorates. So he's Dr. von Eaglefeld, and he's a professor at university. So he's like Professor Dr. von Eaglefeld, and he just gets into these crazy and silly adventures, and it's all about the kind of competition he has with his colleagues. Perhaps it's quite obscure. I mean, the author isn't, so I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there, because this the books later developed. Sorry, Portuguese Irregular Verbs later developed into a series. There are, I think, 3 books, and there's a 4th one on the way. They started out actually as a joke between Alexander McCall Smith and a German academic friend of his. And I think the academic actually bought the first 500 copies of the book because he was so impressed with it. But there you go. So those are the 2 I don't have with me. And then I'll move on. So let's go through the 3 that are works in translation. But there's a chance. I think there's a chance that Steve would have read them. One is 69 by Murakami Ryu, or Ryu Murakami. Not the other one. And there's no relation. You might have seen some of the films made of his books, like Audition, very freaky, strange, horror, yeah, maybe psychological thriller horror things. 69 is actually kind of memoir, I suppose. I don't know how much of it is actually based on Ryu Murakami's life. It follows group of friends, age 17 in 1969 in Japan during the year of mass student protests and all the kind of music they listened to. So, for example, to give you an example of the type of thing, the chapters or contents in the book divided into things like, Arthur Rimbaud, Iron Butterfly, Lady Jane, Power to the Imagination, Alain Delon, Lyndon Johnson, and things like that. So, also Led Zeppelin, Velvet Underground. These are the contents, and it's, as I say, follows the lives of these young people in 1969 in Japan. And we'll go. The next one, I thought I'd have to choose a Czech author. I didn't want to choose Švejk because I think a lot of people have read it. I went for Bohumil Hrabal, who's a very famous Czech author. You may have seen a film based on one of his books, which is Closely Observed Trains, or in America, Closely Watched Trains. And he's very well known. This is also a well-known book, I think, outside even of the Czech Republic. And there's a chance Steve may have read it, but I'm hoping he hasn't. And it's I Served the King of England. And it's a book set in the First Republic of Czechoslovakia in the lead up to the Nazi occupation. And the main protagonist in this, he kind of fluctuates between abject failure and magnificent successes in his life. It's very funny, very interesting, very good. I won't say much more. I don't want to spoil it, of course, for anyone who hasn't read it. But I Served the King of England. Next is a book by a Croatian author. And it's a Penguin Modern Classic, so there's a good chance Steve's got it in his Penguin collection, but maybe not. It's also a collection of short stories. It's the Encyclopedia of the Dead by Danilo Kish. And there's a few short stories in there. Some of them are really weird. The main story in it is this Encyclopedia of the Dead, and what it is like this momentous work, although it's very thin, momentous work of the lives of everybody who ever lived since 1789, I think it is, yeah. And it's kind of interesting. Some of the stories are bizarre, but it's worth a read, and it's not very long. What is it, 167 pages or so. It's something a bit different, but is it different enough for Steve not to have read it? We'll see. Okay, the next one. The next three are kind of memoir or travel log and a bit of history here, so we'll see. I'll go with Timothy Garton Ash's The File, and it's very enjoyable book, actually. It's quite surprising. What it is Timothy Garton Ash, I think it was in the 70s or early 80s. He was a student at the Humboldt University in East Berlin, and he spent some time living there. And then after when the wall came down, I think it was a few years later in 1992, he was curious about whether the Stasi, the East German secret police, had a file on him. And they did. And he managed to get hold of it. And of course, written in that file were all the people who spied on him or denounced him to the authorities and the things he did. So it's very surprising for him. People he thought were his friends, people he thought he could have trusted, turned out not to have been so friendly. And he sets off on an adventure to confront them. And yeah, if you like Cold War history, then I recommend The File by Timothy Garton Ash. And Steve, if you haven't read it, I recommend it. You might enjoy it. Okay, now we're heading into obscurity a little bit here. I felt guilty, but I do like this subject. So the author is well known in his field. But yes, we'll see whether or not Steve's read it. And it is a book called By Orders of the Great White Queen by Ian Knight, and it is the history or story of campaigning in Zululand through the eyes of the British soldier in 1879 during the Anglo-Zulu War. Many of you have again seen the film Zulu probably, and possibly the other film Zulu Dawn, maybe even the TV miniseries Shaka Zulu. This is just a book or collection of observances, I suppose, is that the word, from British soldiers who took part in this pointless war, basically. When all was said and done, the war itself was very pointless. Now, I bought this book years ago when I was a kid because I was absolutely fascinated and obsessed with the film Zulu, and I bought as many books as I could. And I guess I became a little amateur historian on the Zulu War. I don't know. Perhaps I've been unfair. It might be far too obscure. In which case, well, Steve, let me know. If it was too obscure and you think it was unfair, then by all means, I'm happy for you not to give me a point on that one. Unless, of course, you read it, which you may well have done. Okay, and the last one is another favourite of mine, which I have mentioned on this channel a few times. And it's a memoir. And a memoir of a very crazy British soldier, and it's Happy Odyssey, the memoir of General Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart. And as I said in a previous video, he has one of the most badass YouTube entries of anybody probably. And if you're interested to read it, you should go to Wikipedia then and check him out. You see his name there, General or Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart. I think Steve hasn't read it. I guess it wasn't super popular book, but I don't think it's super obscure either. If somebody reads memoir and go towards military history, then it is possible he may have read it, but I don't know. It's very hard. It is really difficult trying to guess. As I said, I probably could have come up with more, but it wouldn't have been very fair, and I have absolutely no idea how highly I will score, if at all. I mean, it'd be rather embarrassing, and especially if Steve does discount this one, I could be the first person to end up with minus points. So we'll see. Anyway, so that's my little contribution to the Has Steve Read It discussion, season 2, and I'm really looking forward to see whether or not he has read any of these. So super. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Daniel, for reviving this. Thank you, Matthew, of course, for creating it in the first place. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I wish you all the best and see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.